welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we're taking a look at engineering disasters.
This
happened.
This was a little morbid. Like, I know we've covered a couple of these, like we've talked about a handful, but like when you read some of these, like some of them were like a way long time ago, and you get it. The engineers weren't that good at the maths. Okay.
Yeah, this is true.
But like some of these are newer, like, you know, when calculators existed, and like you could just like beep bop boop and like figure out, you know, is this going to work, or like, so yeah, a lot of people died. So I didn't tally it because it got really
laughing
morbid.
When you say a lot of people died?
But like in my first two, like 4,400 people died just in my first two.
Well, let's hear what your first one is then, Luke. Don't keep the listeners in suspense.
Don't keep them in suspense. So my first one, and there's a couple that I am kind of bringing home
Molasses.
Here. No, not Molasses. This one is suspended in murky water. This is the Johnstown Flood.
Oh, I love it. I don't love this one, but I like the history of it.
Yeah. So if you're from Western Pennsylvania, and actually, if you're anywhere from Cincinnati as well, I'll get to that in a second. The Johnstown Flood began on Friday, May 31st, 1898. And
89.
89. Yeah, dyslexia. Sorry.
See, this is the reason Luke was beep boop bopping on his calculator, and this is what happened.
Yeah, and I can't be trusted. So unfortunately, 2,209 people died. And here's where the Cincinnati ties in. So bodies were found as far away as Cincinnati, Ohio in 1911.
Oh my goodness.
So this is 20 some years later, they were finding bodies of people that died in the Johnstown Flood.
That's crazy.
Over 1,600 homes were destroyed. So the actual name of the dam, like a lot of people think this was called the Johnstown Dam. It wasn't. So the dam was actually owned by the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. This was a super ritzy ditzy club. Guys like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick were members. They would go up there and, you know, shoot fish and hunt bears and that sort of thing. And when the initial flood happened, they just blamed it on, you know, ungodly amount of rain. Like it was just one of the worst rainy seasons that they ever had. And here it turned out, this was years and years and years later. Like this is literally like, I think this was back in the 90s. A person at the University of Pittsburgh, Johnstown actually used hydrology and mapping expertise to determine that the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club actually made mechanical and civil changes to the South Fork Dam. They lowered the crest. They were changing where some of the drainage and some of the tributaries that it fed, where they were feeding to. And that is what contributed to the structural failure of the dam.
How awful is that? Like all these rich people need a better hunting and fishing club, and therefore everybody's house got washed away.
Yeah.
Like wiping out entire villages.
It's crazy. Like, I mean,
it was ruled an act of God by the courts back in the day.
Yep. Nobody. I think there was one engineer who actually died after all of this happened, or I'm sorry, before all of this happened. And he was one of the people named initially in the case, but I do think they ultimately said that it was just an act of God. The rain was just, nothing could have held back the rain.
Yeah. So over 2,300 plus Woodvale ironworkers. But what's crazy to me is that the wave coming down on these people was 60 feet high and moving at 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, you're not getting away from that.
Yeah, just imagine seeing that coming down on you and just Luke, not good. All right, are we ready to move on to the next disaster?
Shoot.
All right, let's see, where should I go? I think I'm going to go with the Hyatt Regency Hotel Walkway collapse.
This was a new one. This was one of the ones that made me mad because this is a relatively, I forget the year. Remind me of the year. It was relatively new.
It was July 17th of 1981. So it was before modern times, meaning before I was born. But I mean, 81, that's...
Yeah. I was like,
my old wife
what,
was still born then.
6?
Yeah, you were a lot
I was
younger.
7.
You're 7. So
75.
you might have been involved with this design. No. Anyways, this isn't a joking matter.
No,
This
it's
is
not.
the deadliest structural collapse in U.S. history until the World Trade Centers.
Really? I didn't catch that anywhere.
Yeah. So this is where a walkway collapsed, killing 114 people. Keep in mind, structural collapse. So
Yeah.
other failures happen, but as a structural collapse. So this is kind of weird. So on July 17th, a tea dance was being held at the Hyatt Regency in Kansas City.
Who doesn't?
In
Do a tea
Missouri.
dance.
Right, absolutely. Attended by 1,600 people, so it's very popular. At 7:05, the 4th floor bridge suspended over the dance collapsed onto the 2nd floor walkway, which then turns out after it gets smashed by a giant 4th floor bridge, it also collapsed then under the impact and fell to the lobby floor below. In total, 114 people were killed, with another 3 then dying from injuries at the hospital. An additional 219 suffered various injuries in this as well. A 14-hour, this is creepy, 14-hour rescue operation went underway to unbury people from 60 tons of rubble that showed up. And this was hampered by the activation of sprinklers in the lobby from this collapse, which flooded the lobby, but they did successfully remove another 29 people alive. So super bad oversight. So I get it, like it collapses, that's terrible. But it turns out that this walkway was so poorly designed that it could barely hold up its own weight. And so holding up the weight of people walking on it on top of it was inevitable that it was going to collapse. But even stranger is that during the construction, they had a design change and it doubled the load being held by the connections between the 4th floor walkway and the support beams. Specifically, the fabricator basically said, we can't do this stuff the way it's designed. And instead of connecting the walkway to the ceiling, they decided to connect it to the 2nd floor walkway, like having rods going down, connecting them, meaning that 2nd floor walkway was holding twice the weight of the original as designed. So the bridge was barely able to support its own weight. And the guests were on there, had the collapse, basically really bad calculations, oversights, and it was engineers doing approvals over the phone, just being okay, yeah, it's good enough. Nobody really even looked into these changes that were happening. So it was just like
people got some money.
Oh, I'm sure people got some money. Gross negligence, but that's that. Moving on, Luke.
So this is probably one of the most famous ones, and I you left it out, but I have to put it in because our favorite actor, Leonardo DiCaprio, famously portrayed I forget what his name was. I didn't
leave it out. I just
so this is obviously the Titanic. So the Titanic sank on April 15th, 1912, and claimed the lives of more than 1,500 people. So the ship itself had a total of 2,223 passengers in crew at the time.
I saw 24.
Okay. At the time of the sinking, excuse me.
I don't know.
Here, there was more capacity though. So this could have been a much worse. Apparently, the boat could have held up to like 3,700 people or somewhere in that neighborhood. So it could have been a lot worse than it was. So currently, the Titanic rests 12,600 feet underwater. If they would have utilized the lifeboats more efficiently, they said over half of the people on board would have been able to get onto a lifeboat. And here's the crazy part. So imagine you're the guy, you're the one, putting all the stuff on the boat, and it says, okay, we have room for 64 lifeboats. And the guy says, yeah, you know what? There's no way we're going to sink. Just take 20. And what they did supposedly, and this is a rumor, but I'm going to say it anyways. They just put them on the one side that they could see. Like they didn't put them on the other side of the ship. So just one side of the ship had the lifeboats on it. So, and they only had 20 of them. Fun fact, as fun as it could be, Milton Hershey was supposed to be on the Titanic and he didn't go and went on to have a fortune in chocolate.
Did we do an episode either about Hershey or about chocolate
I
making?
think
'Cause
chocolate
we-
making.
I think we mentioned
mentioned
that in
it. Yep.
episode. So
We
check
did.
that one out.
We did. So the ship cost over $7 million to construct. And this is back, in the 1912s. And it took over 2 hours and 40 minutes to sink while the musicians played music the entire time.
As it sank. Wow. Did you see like how it had like 16 different watertight compartments
That just kept
and it
failing.
And with 4 of them flooded, it still could have remained afloat, which is kind of crazy. But consequently, because of, I don't know, I guess sealing issues and whatnot, one spilled into the other, like you said, and then it ended up sinking. But the research showed that like they attributed the failure to things like high content of sulfur in the steel and the low temperature water, therefore causing the hull's steel and rivets to be compromised and fail, causing this accelerated flooding and sinking of the ship. So
one of the things
really
I saw
awful.
too was, and this is another one where they weren't able to prove it. Apparently during construction, like weeks before construction, there was a structural fire in the ship that they were able to obviously put out, but it was a really bad fire that they took care of. And apparently they think that may have caused some structural damage that then led to the demise of the Titanic.
Terrible. And of course there's that whole iceberg thing and them
the
paying
big
attention to that.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right, moving on. Before we do though, I think it's time for a word from our sponsor.
Already?
It is already time.
We're not going to get through all of these.
We're not going to, but we do have some shout outs. So let's
Who
get
do you
through
got?
those. Justin W. wrote in after the PSU, the Penn State
that was a good
Great
one.
Engineering Universities
so good.
episode. Like right after it went live, he wrote in, graduated with an architectural engineering degree, and Andy gave me an update on the University Park campus, like all the changes that are going on there. Apparently the whole west side of the campus, they're turning into like the engineering part, which is great, other than it's a good hour walk from East Halls. So you got to take a bus over there.
Or get a bicycle, get some exercise, kids.
Sure, that's what they're going to do. And then you get your bike stolen. A bunch of riffraff going to that skate school. Also, even though he listens on Spotify, he's going on to iTunes to leave us a review. So be that a lesson to the rest of you bums out there not leaving us reviews. Is that how we get them?
I think that's how you get them to do stuff. You call them bums.
Okay. Next shout out, Hunter G. I've been listening to your podcast for a couple of years now, and I'm really loving what you're doing. I'm finally getting around to writing in after procrastinating, which I can appreciate.
Yes.
On it for a long time. Both of you have a unique relationship and just bounce off each other in funny ways, and your episodes keep my day upbeat and always learning new things.
Well, Hunter, I would say that I carry the show, but that's just me.
I mean, I would agree with that completely. He's the talent, he's the looks, he's the boy, like everything about this is all Luke. I get it. But how about that? Both of our shout outs are from Pennsylvania this time through. Just kind of worked out that way. If any of you are from Pennsylvania and want to write in, or if you're from a lesser state like New Jersey or somewhere else, why don't you go ahead and email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
And you wonder why we're not more popular. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share. We love the reviews, everybody. And as always, you can tell your smart devices to play the Unprofessional Engineering Podcast.
Very good. Very good. All right. So I'm going to move on. Boy, since we're not going to get through all of these,
just save them and we'll do it. And we'll do a number 2 episode with the rest of them.
It'll be a number 2 episode. Speaking of number 2 episodes, we're going to go with the Cleveland, East Ohio gas explosion. See what I did there? So this is nutso. The explosion measured 1/6 that of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The Cleveland, East Ohio gas explosion killed over 100 people in 1944. So October 20th at approximately 2:30 p.m., an above ground storage tank containing liquefied natural gas as part of the company's like tank farm began leaking. It drained into a sewer, which is unfortunate, via the street gutters.
Drained into a what?
A sewer, the sewer lines.
A sewer?
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 Yeah. Sewer.
Sewer?
Sewer.
Sewer.
What, do I not say that to your Pittsburghese way of
You
liking?
called it a sewer.
A sewer. Sewer.
Okay, good.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Do we need to get into the Ferris wheel
No,
conversation again?
No, we don't.
Oh, this gas mixed with the air and it ignited, which is no good. Manhole covers were fired into the air loop. They were fired into the air as the sewers erupted in flame, with one cover actually being discovered several miles away in a neighboring town. That's how bad this explosion was. But then again, everything was fine, right? Initially, everything was contained. We're all good. People went back to their homes. We're happy again. At 3 p.m., a second tank detonated, blew up, we'll say, and leveled the entire gas farm. This sent waves of fire throughout the drainage system. Homeowners found their houses just blowing up and catching on fire.
That's crazy.
So they had to run away again. In total, 130 people, estimate, were killed by the resulting explosions, along with $15 million in property damage. An entire square mile of the east side of Cleveland was destroyed. Other than the deaths, that's probably a good thing, right? 600 people were left homeless, and miles of underground infrastructure was just completely wiped off the map. Good thing was, if there is a good thing, it drew the attention of the public, and this ended up causing a lot of changes to be made to the way natural gas is stored. So now it's all done below ground to prevent a recurrence of something like this. A fun fact, or not so fun fact, I don't know. It was calculated that the explosion was equal to 2.43 KT explosion of TNT. So again, 1/6 an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, and that temperatures reached over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's pretty almost warm. That's almost as warm as my wife keeps the house. So that's good. So that's that, Luke. Moving on.
All righty. So I totally didn't know. So we've all heard of the Hindenburg, and I don't know why. I just assumed the Hindenburg happened in Europe. Like I thought the Hindenburg blew up in like over Hanover, Germany, or something like that.
It came from Germany.
It did. That's why it was called Hindenburg. It was actually named after one of the presidents before the bad guy Hitler was in there, I believe.
They have presidents.
Whatever they were called, leaders, generals, whatever they were. So the Hindenburg, it was an airship. And so basically imagine it's a giant like cigar looking torpedo. To this day, it's the largest flying vessel that ever existed. Like it's 3 times larger than a Boeing 777.
No way.
Like, I guess I've never seen it to scale with like an airplane. Because it blew up.
Spoiler.
Yeah. So it occurred on May 6th, 1937 in Manchester Township, New Jersey. Like, I don't know why I thought it was like somewhere else. Crazy. There were 97 passengers and crew. Like 62 of them survived. Like,
I can't believe that. Yeah.
If you see the pictures of this thing, it looks like super tragic, but I guess it wasn't super high off the ground. And whenever it came to the ground, like the passenger area where they lived where they rode was in like the lower section. And I guess by the time it hit the ground, some of this stuff already ignited. So like a lot of people survived. There's only like, it kind of still stinks, like over 30 people died.
Absolutely.
So that's terrible. And what they believe caused the ignition was electrostatic discharge, aka a spark, ignited leaking hydrogen, because of course they put a flammable gas to do this. Apparently the original design, it was supposed to be helium, which would not have been combustible. I guess maybe, I don't know, hydrogen was less expensive, more attainable. So they went with hydrogen. And a couple other fun facts about the Hindenburg. So these are fun facts. It actually appeared at the 1936 Olympics. And it actually, during that season, the 1936 season, I thought this thing flew one time and blew up. It did 17 round trips across the ocean. So back and forth from Germany to the United States. It did that thing 17 times.
It's like a fancy cruise ship, but in the air.
Yeah. Very fancy. Really expensive to fly on it.
Now, didn't things like the Empire State Building have like big jiggies on the top so that stuff like this could like connect in and they would be able to like
I think that's from
dock
that
there.
Netflix movie,
Is that not
Man
true?
in the High Tower.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't.
I thought that was the case, but maybe I'm
Okay.
wrong. Couple fun facts about this. So you mentioned it was somewhere or other in New Jersey. I believe the explosion happened at the Lakehurst Naval Air Station in Toms River, if I remember correctly. And I say that because fun fact is I actually went and trained the good people of the Lakehurst Naval Facility on finite element analysis many moons ago, Luke. And
Has anything blown up since you've trained them?
Nothing that I know of, but we've probably kept that under wraps. But for anyone who happens to go to Lakehurst, be very cautious, because if you even think about speeding while you're on that military base and you are in a civilian vehicle,
Did you get a ticket?
You have a target. Let's not talk about if I got a ticket or not, Luke. Really cool place though. They had like a big golf course there and everything. They didn't want you to leave the base.
Nice. Taxpayer dollars, right?
Taxpayer dollars. That's right. All right. So before we go on to the next disaster, and you're right, we have so many that we're not going to get to.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do
Let's
a second episode.
take a break for this week's Luke's rant.
So this is kind of like a sober rant, and we're talking about disasters and so this one, it actually made me like, so recently in the news, there was a really bad accident up in Butler, Pennsylvania. A school bus actually crashed into a tractor trailer, and the driver and one of the children on the bus actually died. And the thing that's crazy to me, and I have a daughter that rides a bus, and this really like gave me the feels when I was reading these news stories. How is it 2021 and school buses do not have seatbelts?
I said the same thing to my wife when we were watching the news.
Like,
I was like, I assume they don't have them still, right?
No, they don't. And it's just like, so my daughter takes a school bus, and she's only on like some rural streets. Like she might be going like 25, 30 miles an hour max from here to where she goes to high school. But this was on a highway. That means this bus is traveling at a minimum 60 miles an hour, 55 miles an hour. And we know the road it was on.
That's,
Yeah. So, and it's just, and I mean, my heart was just like aching as I was like reading these reports about this poor young girl that passed away. And I just can't imagine that school buses 2021 don't have seatbelts. And if anything good comes out of something this terrible, like maybe there'll be some legislation that, you know, if a school bus is on a highway, that specific bus that travels on highways has to be equipped with seatbelts. Because I get it's probably a really expensive thing to do, to outfit, you know, hundreds of thousands of school buses across the country with seatbelts. But I mean, these are our kids, right? I mean, is there anything like more valuable than like our kids that we want to take care of? And my answer would be, I'd pay more tax dollars. I would literally pay for my daughter to have her own seatbelt on a bus if I had to. And I think every parent would say the same thing. And even people that don't have kids would say the same thing, that they'd be willing to do that. So hopefully something happens, and it's just, you know, think about your kids, give them a big hug and kiss. And if you don't have kids, give your nephews, your nieces a big hug and kiss. So sorry to bring us down here, but yeah, it was really getting me this week. So
yeah, that's a tough one. All right, moving on. This one, I had this in like my honorable mentions, but it's just so bizarre that I have to bring it up on this one. This is the Great Molasses Flood.
I thought this was fake. When I read this one,
like, I found it on multiple sources, so I feel like it must be real. In 1919, in Beantown, Boston, Boston was flooded by a tank of molasses spreading across several blocks, destroying buildings and drowning residents in its path.
Do you think this is where they got the idea for the movie The Blob?
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Right.
I assume the blob was made out of molasses and we just don't know it. The Great Molasses Flood, also known as the Boston Molasses Disaster. I'm sure other people don't mind this.
How would you like, I know, because if you had a great grandfather that died in this, but how would you like to, like, that's like your family legacy? Yeah. Pap died in the Great Molasses Flood of, I mean,
it's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It occurred January 15th when a storage tank burst, releasing a wave of molasses through the streets of Boston. The cause of the disaster is unclear, but several engineering factors seem to have kind of collectively come together to cause this incident. The tank itself was kind of poorly constructed. Rising temperatures, being that it was January after the cold, during the previous day, believed to have kind of caused a buildup of pressure inside of the poorly designed tank and poorly manufactured tank. And this started like a fatigue crack, especially in Boston, right? Hot, cold,
Yep.
kind of like Pittsburgh, right? Concurrently, the tank was made from steel less than half of an inch, less than half the thickness as required to withstand the pressure. So again, just kind of a buildup of things. Like, it was inevitable that this was going to happen with this design, as well as the inclusion of brittle manganese to save cost. So a lot of these disasters come down to dollars and costs, right? And so poor construction, saving money on materials caused this thing to fail. So at 12:30, the tank collapses. It unleashed. So I'm thinking, like, this can't be that much. A 25-foot wave of molasses raced down the street. So as slow as molasses does not apply to this.
It does not apply.
It was moving at 35 miles per hour. You get smacked by this thing, there's no getting out of it.
Nope.
Eyewitnesses reported buildings being swept from their foundations and crushed, while several blocks of the city were flooded with more than 3 feet of molasses. People were picked up by the rush and snared by the goop that was like filling the streets. 21 people, several horses were killed in the flood, and at least 150 injured. And the residents of the North End have claimed ever since that on hot days they can still smell the stink of molasses.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's awful. That's that's just an unbelievable.
Yeah, you think of all like the worst ways to go, like drowning, burning, yada yada. Drowning in molasses has to be worse than drowning in water, because you're like, where's my waffles?
Yeah.
You know, it's just like
molasses isn't very good to begin with.
It isn't. I've had molasses and it's been good.
I don't know. It's very strong. I think we have time for one more, Luke.
Okay, I'm going to do one more, and this is a little bit of a shout out to an episode that we did.
Ooh, I like
so this is the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, and if you haven't, make sure that you go back and find. I don't know what episode it was. We actually, James and I, had the pleasure of pre-screening I think it was an independent kind of movie.
Challenger disaster.
The Challenger disaster. And we got to see it before it came out. The director reached out to us, and it was basically a movie that was all about this group of engineers that actually raised some red flags about what ultimately caused the problem, and the Challenger ended up exploding. Technically,
if I remember correctly, Luke, our good friend, longtime listener, Dean Cain, also known as Superman, was in the movie.
He was in the movie.
Les Miles, former head coach of LSU football, who's now looking for a new head coach.
So unrelated. So make sure you check out that episode. It was pretty good. We got a chance to talk with the guy about it. It was actually really good. So this happened on, and I remember this because this was on January 28th, 1986. So I was 9 years old. I forget what grade you are when you're 9 years old. But one of the facts that I said was everybody tells this story that they remember seeing it live. And they said, oh, no, very few people saw it live because it happened at like 10:30 a.m. during the day. And most people saw it like on the evening news that day. But I saw it. I was in the gymnasium. McClellan Elementary School. They had the TVs on the carts, like 3 of them all set up, and all the kids came to watch the Challenger launch because Christy McCullough, I'm pronouncing, or McAfee. I'm pronouncing her name wrong.
Yeah,
she was an educator, and it was like, oh, this teacher was going to space and blah. So we literally watched it, and I remember when it blew up, like, the principal and the teachers like didn't know what to do, and then they realized it was an accident, and they just pushed the TVs over. No, they didn't, but they did hurry up and shut the TVs off. And then I think the principal like talked to us like about accidents and stuff like that.
That's unbelievable.
So I watched it
that
live.
had to have been happening in schools all over the country,
everywhere, I'm sure.
Do you remember, like, were you like, what happened, or did you know, like,
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious, like what happened.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, you were a dumb
you've
kid, though. I
yeah,
mean, you're dumb to begin with, and you were a kid.
oh,
So
exactly. But like when you watch it, it was this really big explosion, but apparently it wasn't an explosion in the sense that we think it was an explosion, because there wasn't an actual ignition. It was just it was the leaking fuel and the oxygen coming together, and it like self-ignited. There wasn't an actual explosion of anything. And the cause is the primary O-ring became cold and hard because it was below the tested or recommended temperature the morning of the launch, so it couldn't seal properly. So if you think about what that seal is doing, as this is taking off, all this extra, force is pushing up, it's lifting, so that seal actually gets compressed. And because it became rigid, we all know that rubber, when it gets cold, gets super rigid. It didn't compress enough, and it actually leaked fuel. It all ignited. So a couple interesting things. So the program was called Teacher in Space, and the goal of the program was to highlight the importance of teachers and the interest of students in high-tech careers. This was essentially a precursor to STEM and STEAM. This whole program with getting teachers in space, and it was pretty crazy. Like I remember for like weeks and weeks after it, like the president came on and addressed the nation, and I remember all this stuff like literally like it was yesterday. Like, and it's one of the few things, I have a terrible memory, but I really remember that one quite well. So,
wow. So, well, I'm not going to get into your math, but if I was 4 at this time and you think you were 9, that means earlier when you said that you were like some other age, it just doesn't add up to me. But anyways, one thing that I thought was absolutely terrible about all of this is, so it blew up after like 73 seconds, right?
Yep.
So it was up in the air a bit. The crew cabin was made out of like this reinforced aluminum, so it was a lot stronger, and so it had like the 7 crew members in it. It detached from the wreckage in one piece, which is good, where it then entered free fall, and it got up to approximately 207 miles per hour as it slammed into the ocean. And it's thought that at least some of the crew members were still conscious when it hit the water, which that's just so awful.
Yeah. That sucks.
Anything else to say about that one, Luke?
No, but that one, I said, no, I don't know what other date I gave you, but yeah. So I was born in 75. This was 86. So I would have been, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, I was 11. I'm sorry. I was 11.
Okay.
Yeah, I miscalculated.
Good. All right. Well, on that note, I think I've been depressed enough for one day.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll
do this again next week.
Well, I have enough that I think we can.
Yeah,
so
I do too.
Stay tuned for part 2 of terrible engineering disasters. If you've enjoyed this, if you learned something from this,
it's
episode,
interesting. I don't know if it's a good episode. It's an interesting.
You want to share your memories of any of these disasters, or if you know anyone that got caught in the Great Molasses Flood, anything like that, go ahead and email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com. And until next time,
see ya.